everyone. Thanks for being here. This is my first version of this talk this year. Last year I gave it 6 times, and this is an evolution, so I'm excited to talk to you all about deception technology and a new paradigm shift for real-time breach detection. First, it helps to talk about what honey traps are. They can be honey tokens, or they can be honeypots, and they're designed to be security mechanisms that will entice adversaries to make mistakes. We need these because we need a higher fidelity of low volume alerts so that we can mitigate the blast radius of events and reduce the mean time to detection and save some of our security professionals that are burning out and leaving the industry. All of this is part of a larger discipline known as deception technology. Being a trickster is what will make you most successful, and you'll see over time, if you outdupe your adversary, you'll increase the chances of being able to de-anonymize and figure out when a breach happens at that point, as well as being able to reduce the amount of time it takes to actually remediate it. So, to the point of the analyst burning out, this is the meme of the laundry room Viking, and the relevance here is, the pyramid of pain is a known concept, I feel, for the analysts. And what happens is, you're working 100-hour weeks, and you're, triaging tickets, but you're not getting ahead, and you end up dead. So, don't do that. Let's take care of our people. So why specifically deception technology? It works. And also, what we're doing doesn't work. Look at the headlines from 2013 on. Snowden stole from the NSA. NSA is supposed to be the best at what they do. They had no idea he would walk out. Look at Equifax. Every person who has a credit score has been forever affected. Code Cove, Colonial Pipelines was an example of a digital and physical convergence where there was an impact to pipelines and fuel, and so it's not just digital and physical, it's converging. Bruce Schneier talks about the Internet of Things, or the Internet of Smart Things, and it's all becoming one. And then if you look at SolarWinds, people are still suffering from post-traumatic SolarWinds disorder, right? Everything is third-party risk. This doesn't work, What we're doing isn't working. If anyone remembers Jimmy McMillan, he had a platform specifically about the price of rent being too high. He was right, but he wasn't anywhere near talking about cybercrime. So $6 trillion 2021 is what they estimated it would cost. Then $10.5 trillion in 2025. About every 39 seconds, a business is breached. 847,000 cyber complaints. And there didn't seem to be a solution until now, I hope. Here's another interesting statistic. 212 days is the average, according to IBM's breach report, before anyone even knows that they've been breached. This results in dumps of massive record volumes. Cam4 is a naughty streaming site, almost 11 billion accounts. Interestingly enough, there's 8 billion humans, so what was going on there? Yahoo got pwned across the board, finance, sports, multiple times. And then AADHAR is an interesting study. It was India's attempt to use digital identity across the board. So driver's license, 401k, retirement. The mistake was the government said, this is secure. I invite you hackers to show it. So 2 hours later, this results. It doesn't work. And so you don't do that. No, specifically, I want to talk about canaries and the relevance here. So a few years ago, I started researching and partnering with a company called Thinks Canary. They are based out of Cape Town, South Africa. Their CEO is Rumir, great company. They bootstrapped themselves, into a really successful company. And they use this concept of birds as honeypots in a new context, and canary tokens, which are honey tokens. And I'm going to walk you through each of these examples. Birds are meant to be devices that look real, dumb terminal, smart coffee machine, whatever you want, to configure it. It'll look just like the real thing. And then the canary tokens are various types of tripwires that manifest as API keys, Kubernetes tokens, QR codes. The point is you want to litter them everywhere. You want to create a minefield of these things to force adversaries to trip over them, all the while building forensics and giving ourselves an ability to de-anonymize this person and actually figure out what's happening, while it's happening. Because we want an early, warning breach system. So let's talk more about the bird itself. Yeah, so window to the laws. So if you're a company that's over 10 years old, you probably run domain controllers. They service Active Directory. That's a way to essentially manage machines, users, passwords, and files. Problem is, there's 20 years of research on how to take over Active Directory. Kerberos thing, DC shadow, DC sync. It's really hard to secure it, and adversaries know if you can get it, you can pretty much take over the company. So the idea here is we make a bird that looks just like a domain controller. And this is what happens when you run Nmap. So Nmap, for those not familiar, it's a classic port and service enumeration tool. We can interrogate a bird on ports that are common for Active Directory, like 88 Kerberos, and you can make it so convincing that it looks like they're connecting to a real domain, 80.things.com. Similarly with 389, LDAP, 80 is IIS, so if you hit that page, you get an IIS splash screen, and it'll even capture your login. It looks just like the real thing. Even SQL Server, you shouldn't run it on a domain controller, but people do it all the time because they're dumb. But SQL Server, the build, all the information, you'd be hard-pressed to tell this apart from the real deal. The moment this happens, you don't need to light up your own Christmas tree, because look at this. On the left side, you've got not only port scanning attempts, but attempts to authenticate to services like Microsoft SQL, 1433, FTP. We're capturing it. The incident stuff's on the top. And you can send it to any number of alerting endpoints, Slack, PagerDuty, email. It's rich data. You can then ship it to a SIM. I'll talk more about it. But this is really helpful. And one thing I have to note, I have to show you another example, because domain controller bird is so convincing that Things doesn't recommend it because it interacts with your environment. So it causes issues with Active Directory. That's how realistic it is. So here's an example of Joomla. Joomla's been pwned all the time, so it's attractive on the internet. And if you stand it up with the generic flower, my site looks real, and then you visit it, and in the process, you're going to get a lot of useful information. The IP, the location, the user agent. Why this is helpful is you start to build a forensic trail. If any of you play video games and use Valve, they constantly gather data about hardware survey indexes. Why this is helpful is I'm in Richmond, there's only so many Macs, and there's only so many people running Chrome M1s. You start to see how you can shrink your forensic pool, and this is just the start of things, right? And I wanted to also talk about the native integration that just happened with gray noise and how it's relevant to research Honeypot. So traditionally, before Thinks, a honeypot just sat on the internet, listening for traffic, trying to figure out what the vibe of the day was. It wasn't particularly useful. So you can configure a bird in that way, and it's really helpful then to use something like gray noise, because gray noise is a meta service. It looks at Shodan, Risk IQ, and it goes above and says, we know that's not important. We know Cloudflare is that. But what does matter? Targeted IPs, ones we don't know about, that we want to filter it out. So you can take hundreds of thousands of IPs and deduplicate them and save so much time and get rich context. And then similarly, you can use run zero. They go together like pretzel and beer cheese. So run zero is H.D. Moore's creation. He's the first person to figure out how to do asset discovery well, and the secret sauce is Go. It's fast. But what's cool with this integration, and I wrote a Tyne story automation I'll tell you about, is you can take the canary token IPs, map it to assets, and then you can figure out if these assets should be doing these things. If an asset's talking to Tor, that's probably not good, right? And so you can start to understand your assets, get the context, and try and figure out what's happening. That's tasty. All right, let's talk about tokens now. Let's start with Recon. Rest in peace, Chris Farley. So Recon tokens, there's a variety of them. One of them is DNS, Deceive Nosy token. Yeah, that could be an external one or an internal. And the idea here is we can create a token with a C name for something that sounds attractive. sso.bsidesmunich.org, whatever. When people, and then internally this is great because we can have a dark network segment. Nothing on there. Nobody should be poking around. So if they do a reverse lookup and they're trying to target it, it'll tell us that they're doing DNS enumeration. It's important to note you're going to get the IP not of your server, but the DNS server. But even from that, it could determine I was using Cloudflare enrichment. So right off the bat, you have an idea just from this very simple token that can be deployed. But there's an even better token, probably one of my favorites for nosy O'Donnells out there. It's called the slow redirect. The idea here is you have a site, right? And you can test this yourself, but you go to vpn.bsidesmunich.org. The CNAME actually redirects to your token, and it's so quick they don't realize it, and it sends them to the page. You gather so much information. This is just a snippet, but you'll get the JavaScript agent, the user agent, and it also builds a detailed profile of the geo activity. So this can help you understand, is this part of a larger threat context? Is it sporadic? Trying to understand what's the pattern here. And so it's really easy to deploy, and it's fun. In fact, there's a lot of these QR codes that have been distributed. You probably found it's using that was me. It's a slow redirect. It says Wi-Fi, blah, blah, blah. There are a lot of people that clicked on it, because how can you not? But anyway, and there's another token that's really helpful. It's clone websites. So the idea here is you take a couple lines of JavaScript code, obfuscate it, put it on your pages. If somebody copies it and they redeploy it on a domain that isn't relevant, like thinks.io, I bought that for them and transferred it because it was a highly valuable domain. When I do that, it says, oh, someone's cloned it. Why this is valuable? Well, it's probably a phishing campaign, and there's not a whole lot you can do in those cases, but what you can consider is your legal team sending threatening letters to the registrar, cease and desist. But the important part is that it's even happening, because how do you know otherwise that this is happening? You don't. Let's talk about API. Burt Macklin's on it. Alert, protect, investigate. My favorite token of all, Amazon Web Services. Everyone wants the keys to the kingdom, like Borat, and the reason being is because if you get these keys, you can take over AWS. Everyone uses it. But we can, en masse, deploy fake keys in places that you wouldn't expect them. Suzy Q in marketing has a set of keys, or, Bob Jordan in finance, whatever. The point is, and adversaries make this mistake. They'll take the key off the machine, use it on their own machine, de-anonymize themselves, because we're going to get information like the command they ran, their actual machine. It's not smart. But again, you're building a forensic trail. We can also continue along that path and get more bang for the bucket by using an AWS simple storage service bucket. This is just a way to have raw storage. Amazon back in the day didn't actually care about security, so they just opted you into having your buckets exposed. So a lot of PII and sensitive data ended up on these. Why this token is great is it can blend in with everything, and just the mere fact of listing buckets will trigger this alert. And so it even tells you the command, the user agent. We know from this that it was the Boto3, Linux CLI, the user, the IP again, building the forensic trail, starting to narrow down who this could be before they're even inside our network. And then there's just a lot going on here. I like memes. So if you remember Pimp My Ride with Exhibit, he wanted to put a fish tank inside of a fish tank inside of his car. And so similarly with Slack, you can drop a Slack token in a Slack space, and then you go back to MySpace. But the point here is, I see this all the time. There's Slack tokens in Slack or GitHub, and these tokens, legacy ones, had so many permissions. You could spoof messages from basically anyone to anyone, and they're not good, but they're all over the place. And so drop these in there. If a Slack account gets compromised and this is there, you're going to know pretty quickly someone's in your network. And then there's a pretty recent token about K8s. K, 8 letters, S. Get it? Kubernetes. Kubernetes takes containers, which are a way to run applications, agnostic of OS and so on, but you can do it with hundreds and thousands in an, easy way. And so this is also enticing in a similar way to AWS, because you can use the kube config file and put it on every machine. And so when they hit an endpoint, it'll tell you the user agent, kubectl version. Oh, I'm Linux ARM64. Again, more information just from a simple token. This is really great. And then there's another one. If you guys remember the meme about I accidentally 93 pounds of mangoes, I just think this is funny. So you can use an executable, like who am I, netstat, something that wouldn't be executed on a Windows machine in a normal environment. Like, again, SusieQ is running PowerShell or whatever. So you wrap the token in that, and it fires an alert based off of a registry key. So this is really helpful as well. You can do this to Linux binaries. It's really helpful. Let's talk about your device itself. And here's some tokens that I recommend using on your mobile phone right now because they will help you. For example, there's a WireGuard VPN token. WireGuard is the new and improved open VPN. It's faster, uses, Salsa, different algorithms. And you can drop a token on your phone with the idea that if your phone gets pwned, as it has done with Pegasus and other spyware, someone on that phone's going to try to, interrogate enable your VPN. It's not actually valid, but doing so will trigger it. I've half a dozen people I know actually found out that their phone was pwned from this, because otherwise how are you going to, unless you do detailed forensics? You just don't know. And so this is easy. You can do it now for free. canarytokens.org. I highly recommend it. This isn't a trap, but you can use QR codes. There's a lot of uses for this. Not only just dropping fake Wi-Fi, because most people are going to push out Wi-Fi securely with Jamf or otherwise, but, people snooping around are going to look for, access. And so the best way to use these, though, that I came up with is you drop this in as like Duo enrollment code, MFA, whatever, unread email. You can do it with a Gmail token to every user, and they don't even know. And so if an adversary is in there snooping around, they're going to use it, and then boom, trigger, this, capture information. You can have it do whatever. You can rickroll people. You can send them anywhere. This one in particular, I don't remember what it does, but it's not a trap. I promise you that. If you look at this long enough, you will hallucinate. But let's talk about mind games. This is the point where adversaries getting further along. They maybe know what they're doing. They may not know it. So time to mess with their head and get them to leave or consider a career choice. So data basically should be done. So database tokens, right? They're pretty new, and you can have them contain useless information but sound attractive, right? So just taking this SQL token and importing it. There's nothing. It's a useless pile of nothing. But you could put tokens in here. So you could wrap tokens inside of tokens and build this layer of deception, which is really helpful. And as a result, you also get an alert. There's a lot of potential there, and I recommend it. Then you can start to get into docs. And Conspiracy Keanu had a point. What if conspiracy theories are actually conspiracy realities? Some are, right? Operation MK Ultra, Northwoods. The whole idea here is you make something sound compelling and then you drop a truth bomb on them, because at that point you're just messing with them, right? And maybe they make a career choice. Maybe they learn about post-scarcity economics and the failure of the legacy banking system. Maybe they stop being petty scumbags and leave. That's the hope, right? And you can also do this with Google Sheets. Any D.B. Cooper fans out there? Only successful skyjacking to this day. Maybe alive, may not. They closed the case in 2016, but why not use a spreadsheet? That sounds good, and then drop a bunch of information. Maybe this person learns about D.B. Cooper, becomes another D.B. Cooper. No, that's not going to be good. But maybe they want to follow up on this. This is their new passion, and they make the reward better than making money off exploiting people and companies. That's what I say. Now, Tines put it all together. Tines is a security orchestration automation response platform. They have a really good freemium service. Great team out of Dublin. I wrote this story to pull together a lot of different things, like I talked about getting Canary, creating Run Zero. All of this is made really simple at Tines. You could do it yourself, but you're going to have to get it all janky and write your own Python. This allows you to put events together using their API and different triggers. And so this particular story is in their library, but it does all the stuff, Run Zero, gray noise, and it's only going to take stuff that matters. But it's available, and I have a link to it. So I love Tines. And then there's another service called Lima Charlie. This is like a security automation platform that's really helpful. Because you can send all these canary alerts and build a forensic timeline. It's not quite a SIM, but it does SIM-like things. And It's really helpful. They have another generous tier. Their founder, Christopher Lutz, is a great dude, and he created this token specifically because it's important to note, like, Canary isn't just the panacea for everything. It's for real-time breach detection. You still need preventative controls. You still need forensics. Like, a SIM is really great at historical analysis. It's really terrible at real-time discovery. That's why we need this, right? But you need those in conjunction to actually do the analysis. But I highly recommend it. It's great. And now I want to just show you a way and a scenario of looping this together in what I call deception, inception, 7-layer dip, or 7 layers of this. Here's a scenario. Bad guy pops a server, web server, right? Maybe it's a bird, maybe it's not, but on it you've got a bunch of tokens. You have netstat wrapped in a token, fires an alert to Liam Neeson, get it? Because Sim, I'm funny. Then maybe Nmap is also wrapped, and they happen to find a Windows host on 445. That's convenient, with a document with AWS keys to an S3 bucket. So that you hit all these tokens, and as a result, you're going to have a pretty good idea of who this person is. This is what happens. Like, I always tell the story about why I believe in this. One, I've seen multiple companies not make headlines because some token saved the day. I've seen pen testers from various organizations come in and, trip on a token after 8 minutes and fail and continue. IBM's X-Force, has an engagement that lasts 3 weeks. They write a report that's 70 pages. I'm writing a report on everything they're doing. That's 94 pages. Quite to their dismay, they felt pretty stupid. So, because they thought they pwned the environment, and it wasn't even a real environment. So you can have fun with this, and there is no limit to what you can do other than your creativity. I think that's why I love this so much. It allows us to, be creative and technical in our approach when we want to figure out how do we protect our companies better. How do we, in real time actually know when breach is happening, not 212 days in the future when it's too late, We want to know then and now so that we can get on top of it and stop the bleeding because, it's just we're not in a good place. So we need a new approach. This is my attempt to present something that I think is useful, and I believe a lot in it, and that's why I go and I give these talks and I travel across the world because I believe in it because it works and it's awesome. So, and I flew through that, but I just wanted to now open it up for questions. How am I doing on time? All right, cool. Awesome. Up 4:20. Questions, anyone?
Awesome timing.
I said 4:28. I did it. We're on.
Pretty good. Okay, any questions? Anybody wants questions? Oh, yes. Test.
Thank you for the great talk. I think this is the way to go, and we need to do more of this, definitely. A question. Is there any best practices or deployment patterns for Honey tokens? Like, for example, is it easy to determine how to put enough of them to be able to build a timeline with the tools you said, but not too many that they actually get in the way of doing actual work because every second file is
It's a great question. So Thinks talks about some of their customers with hundreds of thousands of tokens, and the whole point is, in an ideal world, you maybe get an alert a year. Early on, you're going to get tons of alerts as you experiment, but you can never put enough high-fidelity signals in a place. You do have the concern of, people tripping over them inadvertently, but maybe they're an insider threat. And so the whole point is you can look at the pattern of tokens. Like, maybe it starts out that they hit a Google Doc, but then all of a sudden they're looking at AWS keys, right? So it's a balance of discretion. You only can tell certain people this exists even within the environment, and also why I don't talk about who's using it, because I don't want to paint a target on their back. But you also, you need to tell enough people, but not too many, because then the jig is up. So I just have to say, deploy them where it makes sense. If you get a lot of noise early on, probably turn it off or use it as a research. So I have a slow redirect token and the QR that I just use to see who hits it, and hundreds of people hit it all the time. But that's not what is important. And so they have this idea of flocks where you can segment important alerts versus noisy alerts. There's a lot of granularity. But good question.
Any more questions?
Thank you so much for the talk. It does sound sometimes that these canaries, what you're putting, is a bit of manual work. So how do you keep track of all these canaries? How do you keep everything in one place so that you know, even if it takes years or months until someone trip into that canary? So that does sound like also a bit complicated.
Yeah. It's important, one, to have good memos with these tokens, but also to leverage IAC. So there's a lot of really useful things that Canary utils. I've contributed a few, like there's Terraform for deploying an EC2 bird or deploying AWS tokens. And like they make the point, use a good memo. Don't say test token. Say this is a token at this particular time so that you actually know when it's tripped over what its relevance is. You know, so that's important, but leveraging your tools, your Ansible, trying to avoid menial work like leveraging tines, you know, because it's always going to be the token years down the road that saves you, and you need to know its relevance, you know. So, you know what the token is, give it a good description, and try to rely on your normal automation in the way that you should hopefully deploy things securely and, you know, in an automated workflow. So that's my recommendation. We're at time.
Same question as before. Any questions? We have time for one.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I think the active defense or the deception technologies are very important, especially if you consider alert fatigue. I have a question on the other side. So, how can someone detect that something is a honey token, for example, from a red teamer's perspective?
That's a good social engineering attempt. No, right? You tell me. No, so the thing is, like Haroon and these teams, they used to be red teamers, and so they understand this. They have to design something so compelling that they would force themselves. And the idea is you put something that's so valuable, like an AWS token, if recovered, has to be used. No one who's a good pen tester is just going to look at it and not use it. So the idea is you got to think from an adversary's perspective. And this is a good question. It's a cat and mouse game. If all of a sudden adversaries start to see a pattern and there's tokens, you have to shift gears. And that's what you do. Nothing, you know, the whole idea is like adversaries think in graphs, defenders think in lists. Until that changes, like adversaries win. So you can't expect that this is going to work forever, and you have to adopt methods and keep on top of it. But good question, and I would love to know red teamers' experiences. And you know, I haven't heard too many successful attempts in a heavily token environment, but I like to be surprised. Good question.
Cool. So, for any further questions, I guess after the talk.
Yep, I'll be around. Speaker event. Let's chat.
Cool.
I love this stuff. Cool.
Thank you very much again.
Thanks so much, everyone.